Is Nico Hoerner the next Ryno? I said so on the Dan Bernstein show years ago, and I stand by it. But I'm going to ask Tim Wilken what he thinks. The MLB Scout Podcast is back, and we're ready to have you guys join us right here on the Cubs Baseball channel. You know what the music means. It means it's time for the MLB Baseball Scout Podcast. Former Cubs Scout, scouting director, Mr. Tim Wilken, and me, Mick Gillispie. This is show 10, Tim. And what everyone needs to know, we're not going to just talk Ryno today. When we get to 1,000 subscribers, we're closing in. One lucky subscriber is going to get this Ryan Sandberg bobblehead. Keep saying bobblehead baseball, autograph baseball, but I am throwing in a bobblehead doll as well too. So you get 2 for 1. What's up, brother?
Oh, it's been a busy week. All the grandkids are going back to school, so it's been fast and furious.
Well, let's get right into it. I said it. I want your opinion. I'm going to tell you why I said it. I took some heat from the guy that does the morning show on the Score for it for a while, and actually I loved it. Every time I turned around, he was like just dogging me for saying it. Mike Mulligan. But I said it for this reason. Look, Nico had never played in the big leagues, and I was talking to him after his last AA game. And I said, you could play in the big leagues. And I said, you remind me of Ryno. You got the broad shoulders. Ryno was smooth but robotic, if that makes any sense. And I felt like Nico kind of had that same quality. Both line drive hitters that barreled the ball up. And I thought that eventually Nico was going to develop power, which hasn't happened yet. But Ryno was late to develop power. They made him pull the ball. He told me that they told him to hit the ball into the tarp during batting practice. And that kind of what helped him get there. And now look at them. They're both, Ryno was a great second baseman, Gold Glove winner. Nico's on the way to getting there himself. That was my comp, Tim.
Well, I don't think it's a bad comp. And by the way, you might want to get a Nicohoerner sign ball too.
Yeah.
So with Ryno, I think it took him two years before he started developing power. Hoerner's probably in his 3rd or 4th year. Good days. I would think Ryno would tell Nico that as he starts knowing what pitches he can and can't handle with authority, you might have some power that kicks in, and if he learns how to zone up, I think I won't say the sky's the limit, but I think I could see an upward projection pretty quick. So, Mick, stick to your conviction.
Yeah, look, I mean, and I feel pretty comfortable about when I see someone saying, hey, this is who they remind me of. But for radio guys in Chicago, I'm not saying that Nico's going to be a Hall of Famer or he's going to be Ryan Sandberg. I mean, like, he just reminds me of him. And there's been other guys. Chris Bryant reminded me of Cal Ripken, just his body frame and the way that he was kind of an everyday player. And at least in the minor leagues, he's been hurt a lot in the big leagues, unlike Ryno, but Cal Ripken, but he just reminded me of him. And they were both Rookies of the Year and MVP, and they won the World Series their first season. I said it before that, though. It just reminded me of him. But it doesn't mean that he is that guy. It just says, hey, we love doing that in this game, is saying, hey, this guy projects kind of like this guy.
Well, there's something to be said for how you carry yourself, and you have that feel with players down the road that you've met. This is the separator that makes him the kind of player he can be.
Did you scout Nico? I talked to Sam Hughes, who was the Cubs national cross-checker. Now he's with the Yankees doing the same job, about Nico. He said he really loved him, talked about what he looked like in college, told me about a game that Stanford played at Texas and, his ability to use the entire field. And, basically he was a clutch guy and a leader. His parents are so smart, fell in love with him. And I can see why.
Well, I mean, he's been such a star as a player, and we've seen a little bit of an uptick here. I mean, he hit 10 home runs in 22, and he's got 8 at this time with 33 extra base hits. So he may end up around 45, 50 extra hits. He handles the bat. The one good thing in his favor is that he doesn't really strike out a lot. And maybe as he learns how to zone up different pitches, recognize the pitches he can and can't handle, you might see a decent increase in power.
Well, that's what you hope for, right? Is that eventually he's able to develop the power to go with it. And then if that happens, you would really feel good about, what he's able to do to complete his game, right? I mean, power for a second baseman doesn't necessarily need to be something that they have in their game, but you love having that.
Oh, no doubt. And sometimes a lineup, a pretty pronounced lineup, will help spur on those extra base hit numbers. And along with him learning more about the pitchers in the major leagues and, like I said, zoning up certain pitches.
All right, let's change topics here. The Cubs released their first-round pick, Ryan Jensen. Jensen was the 27th pick overall in the 2019 draft. He was a pitcher out of Fresno State who threw hard. He threw hard in the minor leagues. They paid him $2 million. He never got to the major leagues. When you take a guy in the first round, you're expecting a starter. They could use a starter right now. And I wanted to ask you this question. Is this a failure on the scouting or is this a failure on development?
I think this one's a TBC because I know he's had a hang of a 2019 season at Fresno State. More than likely, it'll be scouting. You need to have this thing play out. I don't know what Seattle's plans are for him down the road. But if he runs into a pitching instructor and or a roving pitching coordinator, and they say something that he can sink his teeth into and he's got aptitude to implement, this might be a nice surprise for the Mariners. His walks, though, have kind of increased through the last 2-3 years, and that was probably the concerning thing. I'm not saying it was too quick, but the walk numbers are pretty pronounced. I think he had like 130 and 204 innings.
Yeah.
I looked it up. I mean, the strikeout numbers are good. The hit numbers are really not bad at all. So I think it's a pretty good move for Seattle just to see what they got. And maybe he picks up on something and runs with it. And then you might want to reverse I blame, but you might start studying what went wrong pitching-wise in the Cubs system.
Well, here's my problem with this. Right? He had high walk numbers as a freshman and sophomore, figured it out as a junior in college at Fresno State. He was fantastic. Cubs couldn't get him to figure out how to repeat his delivery. There were a lot of games where he would, because of all the restrictions that they have, and this is my frustration here, is that there's a system that's set up with analytics and, hey, look, if you throw over 30 pitches, you're not throwing anymore in that day. There were a lot of starts he had in Double-A where he made it out of like an inning or maybe an inning and a half, and that's it. Inning and a third. Not everyone is built the same way. I think this guy has a rubber arm. I don't think he's a guy that's going to get hurt. I think he's going to be really healthy. And to me, I'm saying, hey, look, I mean, you just gave this guy $2 million. And you're so worried about sticking to, hey, this is what we do. You know, we're not going to go over this, and we're going to worry about this. Well, you just, instead of worrying about getting the guy hurt, why don't you worry about getting him into the big leagues? Not everyone, and you know this, Tim, as an old baseball guy, not everyone has touch and feel when they're pitching. Some guys have to develop that. And the way you develop that is you throw, and you throw, and you throw, and you throw. Some people, you know what, they're going to get hurt if they throw 100 pitches, and they're probably not going to last in baseball anyway. Some people can throw 200 pitches and be fine and throw 5 days later. He may be one of those guys. We just don't know, because I don't think they ever really just took the restraints off, which is what I would have done. And you don't care if you win or lose in the minor leagues. You know, say, hey, go out there and you're throwing 100 pitches today. And if they come in the first inning, or they come through 5 innings, or they come through 7 innings, you're doing that, and you're going to do that again, and you're going to do that again, and maybe you develop something out of this guy, because I'm telling you, he's got really good stuff. Nothing moves straight that he throws, but we'll never know.
Well, this could be another situation where you've got mentally maybe a late mature. I don't know the young man individually, but sometimes it takes a while to develop the work up in the head. Seemingly there's decent body control there. It's either going to be him figuring it out for himself, or something through the minor league pitching staff of this. So it'll be a good one to earmark and watch here hopefully in the next year or two, and maybe he can turn around. But you know, there's some guys that their heartbeat gets too fast for them in a game, and some reason they can't calm it down. Others have had the same problems and seem to iron it out and calm down as they got a little bit older, the handling adverse situation.
How do you scout for that?
I don't think you do. It's just something that you have to ride out, like you had mentioned earlier. You know, let's try to ride this thing out, let it play out a little. There might be more than I know about here, so maybe that's not everything, but I think today's world, most of baseball is fast with some players. They either want to turn the page and or get the immediate success, which is what everyone wants. But sometimes you have to have a little bit more patience and let things play out. And I'm seeing a lot more guys getting released quicker.
Right.
Just you know, and listen, if you're in analytics, sometimes you got to let those numbers play out a little bit. You can't do it in a small sample size. And, you know, we'll see if this is going to.
Let me kind of throw this at you, Tim. You've been a special assistant to GM. You've worked with ownership. How frustrated do they get when they spend $2 million? And some of these guys, first round pick this year was like, I think close to $9 million. And it used to be, you know, before the slotted draft, even more or less, right? But a lot of money. How frustrated do the GMs and the owners and the upper management on the baseball ops side get when you waste a first round pick like this?
Well, I didn't really have to deal with the owners that much. I think more of them in the past 10 years have become more hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
But I basically just dealt with the general manager and had some good ones that were, they let it roll off the slate because for the most part, if you're hanging around as a scouting director for a considerable time period, I'm guessing there had to be some pluses in there.
Right. You had to have some hits in there is what you're saying.
Yeah, you can have that 0 for 3 day with 3 punch outs maybe once or twice, but you better be pretty consistent with your picks. In this case, unless there's something underlying with Jensen, I just got to think sometimes you got to let these things play out a little further.
Yeah, see what happens. All right, guys, again, make sure you like and subscribe, share, be part of our channel. This is the MLB Scout Podcast. This was the show that started the channel. This is episode 10. We're giving away this Ryan Sandberg bobblehead doll when we hit 1,000 subscribers. So that's going to be really soon. Make sure that you subscribe and be part of it. And thank you for being here and hanging out with Tim and me. Tim, former Cubs scouting director. I'm Mick Gillispie, longtime broadcaster in the Cubs system. All right, Tim. I know you didn't scout either one of these guys, Fukudome or Seiya Suzuki. Both guys, Cubs outfielders, both guys came from Japan, and both guys Fukudome did, and now Seiya is having some difficulty adjusting from Japan's baseball league to the MLB, right? Well, we know you can do it. I mean, look, the best player in the game right now came from that league, right? Shohei Ohtani, one of the greatest hitters ever. Ichiro came from there, but not everyone is Ohtani or Ichiro. Your opinion, why is it so difficult to adjust from the major leagues, coming from Japan to the major leagues?
I think I can give you a decent answer. Unfortunately, I never really did a lot of international scouting, especially over in Japan and Korea, where they have some really good competition there. I'm just wondering if it's more of a grind here. Also, I think there's more consistent velocity and better breaking stuff. So, I don't know if this is with Seiya, and it took Fukudome a while, and it was a grinder for him a lot. And some guys are just not going to hit the wheel, hit the ground, all wheels going. And
right.
I'm getting a little spoiled here with Ohtani. So
you love Ohtani.
Yeah. And I really like Suzuki. There wasn't a lot not to like about him.
Yeah. Well, look, he struggled a little bit, but I'm with you. I think over the course of time, he's going to get it figured out. And after struggling, he had that huge game against the Mets. So, we'll see. The Cubs certainly need him. And he's a good all-around player, but he's paid to be a star. So they need more production out of him, but it seems tough. And I think there's a few reasons why. I think that baseball there is a little different than baseball here. I think that that the way that they pitch is different than the way that our guys pitch. We're more of a power game, and I think they're more of a finesse game. There's a lot more, breaking balls there. They play like a lower scoring game in Japan. I think the balls are dead more compared to ours that have a lot more flight. But at the end of the day, Ohtani's come over here and figured it out. Ichiro figured it out. Nomo figured it out, so hopefully that'll be the same with Seiya Suzuki. All right, Tim, final topic, and I know you were really excited about this one right here, and I thought this was interesting. We were talking about major leaguers from Curacao and Aruba, and with guys like Ozzie Albies of the Braves, Andrelton Simmons, who was with the Cubs last year, that there's players from the small island that are making an impact. I didn't know this. Albies has, what you said, 25 home runs this year. he's the reason that the Cubs have Dansby Swanson, because they could get rid of Dansby, right? They didn't need him because they had Albies. So let's talk about your work with players in Aruba and Curacao, and and kind of tell us about what you saw when you were over there.
Well, first of all, I was watching Atlanta the other night on TV and saw Albies hit that 25th homer. And so I decided to do some homework on Curacao and Aruba. I'd been there twice during my scouting trails. And they didn't really play baseball over there at a higher amateur level until the latter 80s. And like the frontiersman from Aruba and Curacao is Henslam Mullins. He was their first big leaguer, and that was 1989. So I looked up the populations on Aruba, and it totals to right near 300,000. So I started thinking I'm going to do a little survey here, and I saw that there was 21 cities in the United States that were roughly that population of Curacao and Aruba. And you were to rank those 22 different entities, with Curacao and Aruba being included, there were only 3 cities in the United States that had that population that have more bigger than Curacao since 1989.
Mm-hmm.
And that those 3 cities are Cincinnati, St. Louis, and the Orlando area. And then Curacao was 4th and ahead of 18 other cities with comparable population. And you mentioned some of the real good players, and I talked to you about Bam Bam, Andrew Jones, Jair Jurgens, Roger Bernardina, Kenley Jansen, Alexander Bogarts, Didi Gregorius, and of course, one we mentioned, Albies. And so I was just floored where Curacao would place there. And some of the cities in this grouping of 22, Lexington, Kentucky, Henderson, Nevada, Stockton, Santa Ana, Newark, Pittsburgh, Greensboro, North Carolina, Plano, Texas, Jersey City, Durham, and Chandler, Arizona. So, I mean, Curaçao's been pumping them out, and Aruba, and it's been kind of fun to watch those players. A lot of middle infielders, as you can see, a couple pitchers in Jansen and Ponson, but it was a fun survey that I enjoyed going through, and I just wanted to mention this through my trials and travels. My first time that I went to Curacao was 1983. So Team USA, the collegiate team, which featured Barry Bonds, Chad Kruger, Wally Whitehurst, they had a pretty good club. They were going on to play down in Cuba for the Pan Am Games. So they did a little 3-game tour there to try to promote baseball in Curacao and Aruba. The first night, the game was like 26-1. Curacao and Aruba had a lot of guys that were beer leaguers. So the second night, pitcher comes in for Curacao and Aruba. Body very similar to a Dwight Gooden. He was at that time probably 6'2", 6'3", 170 pounds. And he limits the USA team to 2 runs, had close to 10 strikeouts that night, and they lost to Team USA probably 5-1. It was almost like an upset. But anyways, so Pat Gillick had me go down there Toronto. And anyways, I called Pat and I said, hey, I got this. Well, we need to get Epi Guerrero in there, who's one of the famous international scouts for the Blue Jays and signed many big leaguers. So he comes in a week later, sees the same thing that I got to see, and we both recommend it without even knowing it. $30,000, which is a lot of money in 1903. So we strike an agreement, sign this guy. His name is Orlando Stewart, and he was scheduled to come in spring training of March in '84. So all of a sudden, spring training starts, and no Orlando Stewart, and here comes the contract back and his plane ticket, unsigned the contract, and they called, hey, Orlando, what's going on here? And he tells whoever in the office, well, I always wanted to be a ship's captain in the Dutch Navy. And he goes into the Dutch Navy. I get a call from a coworker, international scout in Southeast Florida, Tony Arias with the Blue Jays, and it's 1999 now. And it's I talked to him about it then, and I get a call about 3 a.m. during the Olympics from Tony Arias telling me he saw Orlando Stewart pitch in the Olympics at 34 years old in Australia. So it was quite the side story. He won 8 games in the honk ball leagues, third highest. And he also was a ship's captain, and now he's a pitching coach. He's probably one of the best players or pitchers in Curacao and Aruba that never ever played professionally and could have, and possibly in the major leagues.
Could have been a big leaguer. Yeah, you guys loved him, and he decided to be a ship's captain. Look, you can't take a man away from the sea, Tim. I mean, baseball or no baseball, like that's honestly what I need to be doing right now, Ben, out on the water. All right, final thing today. It's time for Tim's scouting tip of the day. Give us your scouting tip of the day, man. Help all of these, up and coming scouts get a little bit better at scouting.
Well, we're going to go back to the one last week, and the reason I wanted to go back because I didn't really explain enough why to try to get steal times from first to second. And also the reason of doing it is sometimes you just don't get the numbers out of the box as a hitter, and they're a little skewed. Either they were jammed or they hit the ball off the end of the bat. But I gave the times last week. I think what's more important is to watch the runner, see if he goes from a lower takeoff position for his steal, watch for a crossover step. Some guys will stand up and lose time. So, naturally the scale was 3 flat, which was a Hamilton, all the way up to 3.7 and 3.5 being average, or 3.4 being average. I'm sorry. But I just wanted them to be aware and follow that a little bit more. You can get a lot out of not only stolen bases, but guys underway and how they run. You may project them to be a 50 runner, hitting balls, running the first, but after, you got to keep following them. There might be a plus runner in there. You'll see it in the stride, or you'll see them when they steal second, and then you get those kind of times. You can supplement what you're sending into the court on base run.
That's great stuff, Tim. You're going to make a big league scout out of all of us with these great tips. That does it for our show. It went by fast this week. We appreciate all you guys. Last show that we did was by far our most viewed show, and we want to continue that. So please like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Be part of our channel. And again, this Ryan Sandberg bobblehead doll, I did it again. Baseball with a Ryan Sandberg bobblehead. I got to give it to you now, right? If you would go win both. For one of you guys, once we hit 1,000 subscribers, and that is coming up. We'll get back together again next week. And hey, Tim, everybody seemed to love your prospect breakdowns too. They did really well. Hollywood Pete, we had Owen Casey, we had Brandon Davis. We'll have some more of those coming up as well. Make sure that you guys have a great week, and we'll talk to you again real soon.